Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. And tonight we are talking water. Governor Doug Ducey has called for a major rewrite of Arizona water laws that could have big implications for water management here in Arizona, including use of Central Arizona Project water and the ability to move groundwater from one area of the state to another. Some lawmakers have also introduced new water bills, which are not always in line with what the governor wants. And joining us to talk about all of this today is what it means for the state and for growth here in Arizona is Kirk Adams, Governor Ducey's chief of staff. Thank you very much for joining us. And first of all, just what prompted the governor to make this an issue this year?
Well, over a year ago, the governor began hearing from various water stakeholders across the state expressing concerns that now was the time to revisit Arizona water law. So we've spent well over a year working with stakeholders to determine what are the priorities, what are the concerns, and what are the opportunities. And frankly, as the governor said many times, when it comes to water, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And it's incumbent upon this generation of leaders to do what we can to protect Arizona's water future.
And one of the key areas the governor is focused on here is ensuring Arizona's share of Central Arizona Project water, including how it is stored in Lake Mead. What are some of the specific concerns here in this issue?
So look, the hydrology this year, frankly, is not very positive. We have to be very clear-eyed about this. Our snowpack in the Salt and Verde basins are at 15% of the average. Just this week, the federal government said Lake Powell will only have 47% of its average inflows, and Lake Mead sits at only 40% full. When you boil down to what that really means, there is 8 feet of water left in Lake Mead before the first shortages are triggered. So that means we have to do what we can to conserve water in the lake, and ultimately that's the goal of the governor.
So boil this down for our viewers, and what does it mean for them that are watching this tonight? Why should they care about this?
As soon as the levels in Lake Mead reach 1075, Arizona will lose over 300,000 acre-feet of water. Now imagine what an acre-foot of water is. An acre of land, a foot deep, over 300,000 of those. That will directly impact much of our agricultural community first and foremost. So that's going to potentially have an impact on our economy. We take water for granted here in the desert. Arizona leads the nation in sound water management, and we need to make sure that we continue to lead the nation so our state can continue to grow and people can continue to count on when they turn on the there will be clean and plentiful water.
And just to remind viewers what the highlights, he hit some of these in the State of the State. He's addressed some of this before. Some of the highlights of what you guys want to see in this proposal.
Well, fundamentally, we must make sure that we have adequate consumer protections so that when you go purchase a home in a new subdivision, there's an assured water supply and your investment can be protected. Number 2, it's critically important that we talk about conservation, specifically conserving water on Lake Mead. The tool to do that is called forbearance. So the governor is asking the legislature to give him that tool so that water can be conserved on Lake Mead and either avoid shortages or mitigate shortages.
Now, you guys are wanting to move forbearance over to the Department of Water, Arizona Department of Water, correct? Now, how would that fix any drought situations?
So there's only one entity in the state, well, actually 2 entities in the state that can protect the statewide interest. That would be the state legislature, which is elected 30 districts across the entire state, and the governor, who is elected by the state of Arizona. So there are 15 counties in the state, right? The Central Arizona Project Board of Directors is elected by 3 of those counties. So when you look at for the interests of the state as a whole, only the legislature and the executive branch, led by the governor, can best make those choices and decisions.
Okay, and I also understand that this is a key sticking point with negotiations with certain lawmakers down there, correct?
Yeah, folks, it's a complicated issue, right? And it takes some while for everybody to get their arms around it. But this is a legislative process. Senator Griffin and Representative Rusty Bowers are doing great work on this issue in providing leadership on water. And frankly, water needs giants. They need advocates and champions at the state legislature, and they're providing it. The bill isn't quite right yet, and we look forward to them to get it right.
And from reports we've seen, there was a report that this negotiation with Representative Bowers, Senator Gail Griffin from Southern Arizona, has gotten pretty tense. And I'm referencing one specific report where Griffin walked out of her office during talks about this water. Is there, what can you tell us about that?
That wasn't a meeting that I was involved in, so I can't speak to that specifically, but I can tell you all of our interactions, both with Representative Bowers and Senator Griffin, has been very amicable. Of course, there are some differences of opinion, but again, I stress, this is what the legislative process is all about.
Sure.
It's about finding common ground where we can compromise for the best interest of Arizona.
Sure. You are the Chief of Staff, so you're probably aware of the details of that meeting. What was the sticking point during that discussion where Griffin walked out on your staff?
Well, the sticking point for Senator Griffin and to some extent as well Representative Rusty Bowers has always been about this issue of forbearance, right? How do we conserve more water on Lake Mead? Look, there are well-intentioned people on both sides of this issue. Water has always been a complex and difficult issue in the state. It's no different now, but I have confidence that in time, everyone can figure this out.
Okay, we're talking about the Colorado River Basin and whatnot. Arizona's not the only state that draws water off that. California and Nevada. Are they involved in any of this? What are they willing to give up? What are you willing to give them? What's happening here?
For the last few years, there's been a very important ongoing negotiation between California, Nevada, and Arizona called the Drought Contingency Plan. And in the draft form of that plan, for the first time, California has agreed to take water shortages in the interest of keeping water on the lake so that we don't meet those critical levels. This is why forbearance is so critical, so that the Drought Contingency Plan can be implemented and we can preserve the lake levels on Lake Mead.
Now, are the tribes at all involved in any of this, since they do control some of the water here in Arizona? And what does the governor want to see happen with that? What do the tribes want?
Well, that's a very important point. I'm glad you raise it, because our tribal communities control almost half of the Colorado River water. They are a key player in not only the water, but the state as a whole. And what forbearance will allow us to do is for tribal communities to create what's called intentionally created surplus. This is water that they are using right now that they would choose not to use and keep it on the lake, thus helping the state avoid these overall shortages.
Okay, and again, another sticking point, another concern with certain lawmakers, particularly the ones we were talking about, is that developers may be able to find a way around some of these limitations and be able to get their hands on more water. Could you speak maybe to that?
Yeah, I think that's an issue of also of critical concern. And this is referencing what we call assured water supply or water adequacy rules. This means when you go buy a home in a new subdivision, that builder must have received a certificate from the Department of Water Resources that there's a 100-year assured water supply. We will not do anything that we believe undermines that important consumer protection.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for this complicated topic, but I'm sure we'll be talking about this more as this issue moves along, obviously, an issue of great importance to the state. So thank you very much. Kirk Adams with the Chief of Staff for Governor Doug Ducey. And next on Politics Unplugged.